Shalom, 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 shalom. First, I want to give all the praises and the glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah, Kadash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who are leading this word in truth, in spirit, and sincerity. And salutations to all of the righteous Hebrew Israelite brothers out there that are teaching this word in the name of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. Shalom to the hopeful elect of Israel, to the brothers and sisters of Israel. Shalom, shalom, shalom. As we can see, today's edification, we're going to talk a little bit about the native Indians' journey to the Western Hemisphere. The Native Indians' journey to the Western Hemisphere. All right, on how they got to the Americas. I'm going to remind those of you, and for those of you that don't know, we're going to show you exactly how our fellow brothers and sisters of the Northern Kingdom, today who they call Latinos, Hispanics, Mexicans, and Puerto Ricans, how they got to the Western Hemisphere. How did they get to the Americas? We're going to show you in biblical scripture how they got to the Western Hemisphere. And we're going to show you in the secular history how the Northern Kingdom, which are called the 10 lost tribes of Israel, referred to as the 10 lost tribes, which are no longer lost because we know who they are. How they got to the Western Hemisphere. How did they get to the Americas? So, first, we're going to show you this footage. This is one of the oldest footage of the Native American Indians, right, which was recorded over 100 years ago in their habitation when Esau came to the Americas. So we'll quick look at this. These are our warrior brothers and sisters, our warrior brothers and sisters from the Northern Kingdom. This footage was taken about 100 and we're in 2021, roughly 140 years ago, around 1890 to 1880s, right? When Esau got his stranglehold on the Americas. Did you see that? See what she's cooking there? What's she cooking there, family? Can you see what she's cooking? Look. That's what we call unleavened bread. What do we cook unleavened bread for? For the Passover. What's one of our main supplements, the Israelites, that we eat? Is what? Unleavened bread. That's what she's cooking in the oven. Just so you understand, once again, to show you that these are our people. That's unleavened bread that she's putting together. She's grinding up the flour, and you're going to see. Put it in the oven. Look at that. It's beautiful. Making the fruit juice. So quite like yesterday. These are our people. Beautiful. our people. These recordings are over 120 years old. They're between 120 and 140 years old, these recordings of the northern kingdom of Israel. Beautiful. $1894 would be what? We're in 2021. So this footage that we're looking at now would be 127 years old. 127 years old. 1894. See a buffalo dance. See it. That's Israel. That's Israel. Those are the Israelites. Those are our people. Those are the 10 lost tribes of Israel. That's the northern kingdom that we've just witnessed there. It's a beautiful thing to see. So, without further ado, we're going to pull up some scriptures. 1 second. All right. Where did we want to go to? I'm just going to share this screen. Stop sharing that one. Current tab. So, as you can see, that's the nation. That's the tribal nations of the Western Hemisphere. To your left is North America, right? And to your right is South America. And that's where they went. They went to North America and South America and Canada. As you can see, these are all of the tribal nations of the Northern Kingdom, spread out across the Americas. At the top here is Canada. Those are the tribes in Canada. I know we can't read what he's saying because the writing is very small. Down here, that's North America. These are the tribes all in North America. And over to your right on the screen, these are the tribes all scattered across South America. These are what's known as the 10 lost tribes of Israel. These are the tribal nations in the Western Hemisphere. This is who we're looking at. It's beautiful. That's where they went. This is where they came after their captivity. That's where they came after their captivity. North, south, east, west. So let's share. We'll share another screen. Hold on. Keep bringing out some information here. 1 second. Share screen. So, as we can see, as we just saw, these are all of the tribes scattered across the Americas. So all the tribes scattered across North. This is where they came. This is where the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom came. Right? They came to the Americas after their captivity under Shalmaneser V. Right? This is where, and we're going to read about it in the Bible. So you see here, Israelites exiled. Can you see that? That's where they were taken into captivity. When they were exiled, that's where they were taken. So if we put up, let's just go to the scriptures. That's where they were taken, right? That's where they were exiled to. Right? Israelites exiled. This is the Assyrian Empire. Right? As you can see here with the mouse is, they were brought into the Assyrian kingdom from the northern kingdom. So let's just do this. So let's bring it up here. Let's just bring it up here. Bring it. We're gonna go straight to it. Let's just bring it up here. It's beautiful. We're gonna go to, just hold up the Bible 1 minute. First Kings 17. I want to go to Second Kings. So let's go to 2 Kings chapter 17. 2 Kings chapter 17. Israel's captive. This is where it all took place. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Hala and in Harbor by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. So this is when the Israelites were taken into captivity by King Shalmaneser. He was known as King Shalmaneser. So he says there, and we'll show you, as it's Chronicles. Let's go to second. We're going to go to chapter 5, I believe. Chronicles chapter 5. I'll just quickly show you. First Chronicles chapter 5, verse 25. It says, and they, which are the Israelites, this is talking about the northern kingdom, transgressed against the Most High, right? Powers of their fathers, and went a whoring after other gods, right? After the gods of the people, of the land, whom they had taken from, whom the Most High destroyed before them. This is why they were taken into captivity by the king of Assyria. And the Most High, the powers of Israel, stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, and the spirit of Tilgath-Pil, can I pronounce this man's name? Tilgath-Pilneser, king of Assyria. And he carried them away, even the Reubenites, tribe of Reuben, right? And the Gadites. So these make up the Native American Indian tribes of the Western Hemisphere, right? Part of them. And half, remember, Gad are the North American Indians, right? The Reubenites are in South America. Well, not South America, I mean Florida, down south in Florida. Let me correct myself, I didn't mean to say South America. The Reubenites are down south in Florida. Those are what we know as the Seminole Indians, all right? That are mainly based in Florida, down in that part of America, right? So even the Reubenites and the Gadites are mainly the North American tribes, and half tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh, I believe, we know today as the Cubans, so the indigenous people of Cuba, and brought them unto Hala and Harbor and Hara, unto the river Gozan, and unto this day. So that's where they were taken. So it shows you here, the story goes into it here. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned, like we just read, against the Lord Yahweh their power, which had brought them out of the land of Egypt under the hand of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. And the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against the Lord, their power, and they built them high places in all their cities, and the tower of the watchmen to be fenced cities. So this is what their crime was. This is why they were taken out of the land. And they set up their images and groves in every high hill, and under every green tree, and under every burnt incense in all the high places. And there they burnt incense in all the high places, as did the heathen, whom the Lord Yahweh carried away before them, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord Yahweh to anger. For they served idols, wherefore Yahweh had said unto them, Ye shall not do this thing. Yet the Lord Yahweh testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the laws which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks. That's what the northern kingdom did. They hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers, and did not believe in Yahweh their power. So they lost faith in their power, Yahweh, the Most High, the northern kingdom. Right? They lost faith. So, and they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which they testified against them, and they followed vanity. That's what they did. That's what the Native American Indians did. They followed vanity and became vain, and they went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom Yahweh had charged them, that they should not do like them. That was their crime. That's why the Lord allowed the king of Assyria to take the northern kingdom into captivity. Because they went after the other gods of the heathens. They went after the gods of the people who the Lord had expelled, had removed from the land. The majority of them, it was via wars. The Most High gave the Israelites the power, the strength and the power to remove all of these heathens from most of the land. And yet they went up, and yet the Israelites went a whoring after these gods of these heathens who they had removed out of the land of Israel, out of the majority of the land of Israel. And remember, at this particular junction here, Israel is split into two kingdoms. We've got the northern kingdom, which is what we're talking about now, which is called the kingdom of Israel, and we've got the southern kingdom, which is the kingdom of Judah. So the northern kingdom made up what we call the 10 lost tribes, or the 9.5 tribes, right? While the southern kingdom made up the other 3.5 tribes. And they left all the commandments of the Lord, their power, and made them molten images, even cut 2 calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the hosts of heaven, and served Baal. They worshipped the stars, and were serving Baal, which was a god of the heathens. If I'm right, I think it was the god of Baal, was a god of the Amorites or the Amalekites. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and they used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of Yahweh to provoke him to anger. This is why they were taken into captivity by this king here, Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria. That's why the Lord allowed him to carry them away, because of the wickedness that they was doing in the land, because of the abominations that they were doing in the land. It says, therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. That's the southern kingdom. So the Lord removed the northern kingdom out of his sight. He allowed the king of Assyria to take them into captivity. So those of you, those of the Native American Indians of North, South America and Canada, the indigenous people of North, South America and Canada, this is why You're in that predicament you are today. It goes all the way back to when you were removed out of the land under King Tiglath-Pileser, also known as King Shalmaneser V. The Lord allowed them to remove you from the promised land, from the kingdom of Israel, and took you into captivity. So it says, and the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel and afflicted them and delivered them into the hand of spoilers, which was the king of Assyria, until he had cast them out of his sight. This is where it goes all the way back to this time. Your predicament that you're in today, my fellow tribal native Indians, the tribal nations of the Western Hemisphere, today who they call Native American Indians, today who they call Latinos, Hispanics, Mexicans, and Puerto Ricans. The reason why you are in that predicament you're in today goes all the way back to when you were taken out of the promised land by King Shalmaneser V, also known as King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria. It goes all the way back to 722 BC, between 722 BC and 725 BC. That was the beginnings of the downfall of you as a nation before you came to the Americas. So it says, for the children, for he rent Israel, tore them apart from the house of David. He tore them apart from the house of David. And they made Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, king. That's when the kingdom split into two. And Jeroboam drave Israel from following the Lord and made them sin a great sin. This is where it all started for you, when the kingdom split into two. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, became the king of the southern kingdom, and Jeroboam became the king of the northern kingdom. And that's when Israel had two kings. That's when it all started. That's when the kingdom split into two. So it says, for the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did, and they departed not from them. So again, all the way back to King Jeroboam, after Solomon died, which would have been around David ruled from 1020 BC to 980. So it would have been around 940 BC when Jeroboam became king of the northern kingdom, when Israel split into two kingdoms. It would have been in the middle of the 10th century BC, which was around 940 BC, after Solomon died. That's when the kingdom split. And then 200 odd years later, about 220 years later, that's when the Lord brought in the king of Assyria to take the northern kingdom into captivity. Because of the sins, the idolatry that was brought into the land by the first king of the northern kingdom, which is Jeroboam, after Solomon died. So from Jeroboam being king, 220 years later, the northern kingdom was rife in idolatry. Rife in idolatry. Everyone was committing idolatry, worshipping different gods, building different groves to worship. This is why the Lord brought in the king of Assyria to take you down. So it says, for the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did, and they departed not from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants, the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. And it truly means unto this day. So this is what they did. This is the Assyrian Empire. This was Israel here. This is Judah and the southern kingdom down here. This is your adversary, Edom. These are the Edomites. This is where they lived. All right? Today, who they call themselves Caucasians and white people. That's where they lived. They lived to the south of Judah. All right? So this was Judah. And up here, where it kind of says the Canaanites, this was the northern kingdom. So Israel split into two. Judah had its own king. The northern kingdom had its own king. And it was the northern kingdom that was taken into captivity. And this is where they were exiled. See, it says the Israelites exiled. That's where they were taken, by the king of Assyria. And then the king of Assyria took people from Babylon, from Asher, I believe, from Havar, from from all of these places that he ruled over. He took his people and he put them in the land of Israel. It should tell you. It says, until the Lord removed all Israel out of his sight, as he had said by his servants the prophets, so was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day, which means they were never to return. Now, were they remnants of the northern kingdom living amongst the southern kingdom? Absolutely yes. So you would have had families from the different tribes that made up the northern kingdom that were living amongst the southern kingdom, living in Judah, because they didn't like the idolatry that was going on in the northern kingdom. And at this time, all of the Levite priests were expelled from the northern kingdom. And Jeroboam made his own priests, used men from different tribes to make his own priest. So you had Israelites that belonged to the other tribes that didn't want to live amongst the northern kingdom and came and lived amongst the southern kingdom in Judah and wanted to be under the rulership of King Rehoboam and not under King Jeroboam. So yes, there would have been absolutely remnants of Israel from the northern kingdom that lived amongst the southern kingdom. Didn't like what was going on up in the northern kingdom, so they completely removed themselves from there. Or didn't like the idea that it was split into two kings. They didn't want to be ruled by Jeroboam. They wanted to be ruled by Solomon's son, Rehoboam. So they came to live in the southern kingdom in Judah. Just so you understand. So it says here, so this is what the king of Assyria did. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Kuta and from Avar and from Hamath and from Seraphim and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. So that's who was in the northern kingdom now. Well, these people that came from the Assyrian and Babylonian empire. And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. So that's what they did. So the king came and took people from his kingdom, from Seraphim. See, it says Seraphim, Babylon. Where's the other place? Is it Asher was the other one? Where was the other places that they mentioned? Avar, Hamath, Kuta. Let's see if we can actually find them. Avar. Where's Avar? Okay. Hamath. Shushan is one of the places. The Hamarians. Well, basically, he took them from his kingdom, Ekra, and he placed them. So he took his people that he ruled over in the Assyrian Empire, and he placed them in the northern kingdom. That's what he did. Just so you understand. Just grab some water. Sorry, family. Salaki. Salaki, family. The throat's a bit dry there. So that's what he did. Just so you understand. So those Israelites that were taken into captivity never came back to the land. But they were Israelites from the northern kingdom that didn't want to live amongst their fellow tribes and came to live amongst the Israelites in the southern kingdom. So they're taken out of the land, and then the king of Assyria brought people from Assyria and put them in the land of Samaria. That's why the Lord said, do not go to the Samaritans or to the Gentiles or to Samaritans, but go seek the lost sheep. I don't like to butcher it, but the Lord said, these 12 Yahushua sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles or into any city of the Samaritans, enter ye not, which is Samaria. Go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, because the most Lord understood that the majority of these people that was in Samaria, not all of them, but the majority of them, that was in the northern kingdom now, were heathens that were brought in there, going all the way back to the Assyrian King Empire. So now, how did they end up in the Americas? All right? How did they end up in the Americas? Well, let's quickly go to it. This is the final part. This is how they ended up in the Americas. We're going to go to Second Ezra, I want, chapter. Second Ezra, chapter 13. And let's go straight down to it. Second Ezra, chapter 13. But this is how the tribal nations of the Americas. So this is how did these people here that were exiled, because they would have got to the Americas. How did they end up in the Americas? They was in captivity for about 25 years under the Sumerians, right? Under the Assyrians, sorry. Now, how did they end up in the Americas? Because they decided not to go back to the promised land. So the story is told here. It's all here. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hoshea, the king. So that's the king here. In the time of who? Hoshea. This is the king here that we were talking about. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria. So this is the king here. This is who's the king. So it says, in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. So this is who Ezra is referring to here. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hoshea, the king, who, Shalmaneser, who's the same king, Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, led away captive, right? Led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so they came into another land. So that's when the Assyrian king took us from the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes from the northern kingdom, over the waters. The waters are what? The Tigris and the Euphrates. And then brought them into his empire, and they were exiled. These are the waters that they took, that the king of Assyria, Shalmaneser, the 5th, took them into his kingdom, the Assyrian kingdom. These are the waters that he took them over. The Tigris and the Euphrates. Right? Took them over the waters, and so came they into another land, right? Which was the Assyrian Empire. But they took this counsel amongst themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So they took that counsel together after their captivity, all right? Hold on a minute, so I'll find it here. Okay. So they took counsel after their captivity that they were going to go to another land to serve the Most High. So where is this other land that they went to? That they might keep their statues which they never kept in their own land. So they didn't want to go back to Israel where they didn't keep their statutes. Right? We read that, King 17, right? 2 Kings chapter 17. For they served idols, wherefore the Lord had said unto them, ye shall not do this thing. So they didn't want to go back to the land where they wasn't able to serve the Most High Yahweh, because they were hard-headed. Remember it says there, verse 14, notwithstanding they would not hear, but harden their necks like to the neck of their fathers, that they did not believe in Yahweh their power, and they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them, and they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord Yahweh had charged them that they should not do like unto them. So they decided they didn't want to go back. After their captivity, they was in captivity for around 25 years under the Assyrians, that they might keep their statues which they never kept in their own lands. That's what they decided, right? But they took this counsel amongst themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, the Assyrians, and go forth unto a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might keep their statues that they never kept in their own land. Right? That's what they decided amongst themselves. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. So they entered to go to this new place to serve Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. They entered into the Euphrates. This is the Euphrates here, river here, that goes into the Persian Gulf. Right? So they got on their ships that they built and entered into the Euphrates. This is what they did. By the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. Right? For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Asarus, which means new land, right? Asarus, which means new land, right? Or new earth. So if Eretz, I think if we go to the, just to show you, look at the word, it's earth in the Hebrew. So this is one-on-one. Let's just quickly go there. God converted to heaven and the earth. Okay, so that's the word earth. Trying to show you. Eretz, right? Eretz. This is where they went to. New earth. Azareth. 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 This is what it's talking about. New earth, new land. So where they went took them a year and a half to get to this same region, which is called Azareth, New Lands. This is where the 10 lost tribes went. So where is that place? That place is the Americas. So they came through the river Euphrates, the Persian Gulf, and then let's see if there's a map, a bigger map to show us. So there's a bigger map to show us. Let's see if we can get one up. Just to show you, probably world map would be easier. We can actually show you the journey that they made. Images. So this is the journey that they took, right? So this is where they were. This is the Assyrian Empire up here, parts of Iran, parts of Iraq, and so forth. That's the Euphrates comes through Iraq. This is the Persian Gulf here. So this is the journey they took, Persian Gulf. When the scripture says that the Most High stayed the waters, for the Most High showed them signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over, because When you go around the Horn of Africa, it's known as one of the most roughest part of the seas. The roughest part of the seas out there is meant to be around the Horn of Africa when you come around here. So this is when he said he stayed the seas, he steadied the oceans for them to make this journey. So they've come out of the Assyrian Empire, which is what we know today as modern day Iraq, right? And parts of Iran, right? Euphrates, into the Persian Gulf, into the Arabian Sea, and this is where they've come. Around here through the Indian Ocean, around the Horn of Africa, come right around the Horn of Africa here. Around here, this is where the roughest parts of the seas are. This is where the Most High stayed the seas for them to make that journey. And then they came to the Americas. Then they came to the Americas and and this is where they ended up. First they came to the South America, and then they spread up. They went, they started to separate. The tribes started to separate. Some tribes went north, some tribes went far north, right? So north would have been North America. That's where Gad was, the tribe of Gad was. The tribe of Reuben went up here as well. Down here, we would have like the tribe of Naphtali, Issachar. The tribe of Issachar went to what we know today as Mexico, right? The Aztecs. The Reubenites are down here alongside the Asher, Naphtali. Manasseh went to the islands, Cuba. Ephraim went to the islands. They went to Puerto Rico. So they were on the islands. The islands would have been here, sorry. Down here, we've got Cuba, Puerto Rico. This is where Manasseh and Ephraim went. Ephraim went to the islands, right? Which we call like the West Indies today. That's where they went. Reuben, Asher, Naphtali, Zebulon, all down here. Simeon went to the islands, which we know today as Dominican. Gad, the tribe of Gad and the Semele Indians went to North America, and some of them even as far as up into Canada. But that's where they went. This is where the Native American Indian tribes went. This is how we know who those people are in the Americas. We know through biblical scripture, and we also know through the language that they spoke. When Columbus came to the Americas, that Columbus had 5 Hebrew interpreters on his ship when he was looking for this new world, because he knew that's where the 10 lost tribes were. Columbus read 2nd Ezra chapter 13 to know who these people were out there and how they got there. He knew they never went back to the promised land. So I just really wanted to touch upon that today, boy, just to remind you again that those are our people, right? Those Native American Indian tribes of North, South America and Canada are the 10 lost tribes of Israel. It's all in the scriptures showing us their journey to the Americas, which I said was around 724 BC. It tells us how they got to the Americas, right? And then, as we say here, for through the country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. That was the journey. And the same region is called Azaros, which means new earth, new land, all right? Because Eretz is earth in the Hebrew. Then dwelt they there until the latter time. What latter time was that? That was latter time until the rest of the tribes joined, which was the Southern Kingdom. How did the Southern Kingdom get to the Americas? On transatlantic slave ships. They came to the Americas roughly 2,200 years later, the Southern Kingdom. Then dwelt they, the Northern Kingdom, and they there until the latter time, and now when they shall begin to come. That's when the Southern Kingdom came on transatlantic slave ships. All right? So this is, once again, together. I don't really still much. I don't really want to go into something else, but basically, it's going to go into tell you about how the Lord is coming to deliver the 12 tribes. Right? It kind of goes into that to do with the Judah and Israel being oppressed together, which we read about in Jeremiah. You know, that the Israelites from the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom were oppressed together. Where were they oppressed together? They were oppressed together in the Americas. All right. And this is why the southern kingdom had to come later, according to prophecy, to join the northern kingdom in America, because they were going to be oppressed together in America before the Lord himself comes to deliver the true children of Israel. All right. So that's why now today we see the brothers on the highways and byways preaching together. We just quickly bring up that scripture before we shut this down. It's Jeremiah 37, 50. Right. Jeremiah 50 verse 33. Thus says the Lord of hosts, right? The children of Israel, which is a northern kingdom, and the children of Judah, which is a southern kingdom, were oppressed together. And all that took them captives, who took us captives? The Esau, Esau, the Edomites, right? The so-called Caucasian white man, held them fast. They refused to let them go. And we are still in their hands today in the Americas. They refused to let us go. But only the Lord is going to be able to deliver us from our predicament. So to my fellow Israelites from the northern kingdom, those that they call today, those that they call the Native American Indians of North, South America and Canada, you are the children of Israel. You make up the 10 lost tribes, or what we call the 9.5 tribes. The tribal nations of the Western Hemisphere, you are the Israelites. The reason why you went into captivity goes all the way back to the Assyrian Empire, when King Shalmaneser took you into captivity. How you got to the Americas is in the second book of Ezra, which we just went through, and you will be delivered, but only the elect of you, only the chosen out of you. Not all of you are going to be delivered, only the chosen out of you, because 2/3 of our people are not going to accept this truth of who we truly are. 2/3 of the tribal nations of the Western Hemisphere are not going to accept that they are Israelites, are going to still continue to try to believe that they are Indians, what these so-called white men call them. Only 1/3 of the tribal nations of the Western Hemisphere and 1/3 of the Southern Kingdom, those today what they call African Americans, West Indians and Caribbeans, which are from the Southern Kingdom, the Kingdom of Judah, are going to be delivered out of Babylon the Great. So, on that note, I say again, I pray this was an edifying lesson for those of you that tune in live, and for those of you that may tune in later. It's another reminder of who we are and about keeping the faith, because we can only be delivered by one person, and that person is Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. So I'll give all the praises and the glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim Rakah Kodash. As I like to say, until we meet again, family, I say I pray this was an edifying lesson to those of you that tune in live, and for those of you that may tune in later. We give all the praises and the glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, family. Right? Shalom, shalom, shalom. Keep up the faith. All praises.